Welcome back to Fuel Up Classic. Now, if you haven't subscribed already, please do, because there's plenty more classic cars on the channel coming your way weekly. Now, this video is all about one of the most elegant Mercedes SLs ever produced. It's the R107 era. It's a beautiful, beautiful car. This is a stunning example. I thought I'd just give you a very quick introduction to the car, but later on we're going to be taking it out for a drive. I'll let you know what it's like to be behind the wheel and also what to look out for and what to pay if you're ever thinking about buying one. Now, it's one of the hottest days of the year today in the UK, and I've got my hands on a classic R107 Mercedes SL. And I thought, what better way than to get the roof off, go out for a drive on some really good country roads, and just talk you through why these cars are such an iconic Mercedes, and also why they could be a really good classic car purchase as well. So one of the first things you notice when you step into an SL of this era, or really any Mercedes of this era, is the fact that the build quality is absolutely second to none. They were nicknamed when they were put by the engineers as the Panzer tank, and it's easy to see why that name was given. The build quality is exceptional. Everything in here feels bank vault-like in terms of quality. It's hard to believe that this car was designed in the 1960s, made its debut in 1971. But it doesn't feel like that from in here. It still feels like a really nice place to be. There's not a single squeak or rattle in this car. It's so well engineered. It really does come from a period of Mercedes-Benz quality that they've never matched since, and probably never will. These cars were massively over-engineered. I was lucky enough to own a W123 Estate, a car that's now very rare and very collectible, and that was exactly the same. The interior was exceptional. This particular car, this isn't a V8 power, this is a 6-cylinder model, and I've never driven a 6-cylinder one. But my initial impressions are it's silky smooth. Yes, you don't get that V8 burble that you get on the bigger 5-litre V8s, but it absolutely goes down the road really, really well. I think I would miss the V8 noise if I owned this car, but if all you want to do is cruise, 6-cylinder is a really, really good option. It's cheaper to buy, they're bulletproof reliable as long as they're looked after properly, and you should have very little headaches if you buy a good R107. They do offer a fantastic all-round package for classic car owners. But with this being the 6-cylinder, say you shouldn't be concerned about power, because if I put my foot down now, the 4-speed gearbox still kicks down, and we're still going a fair rate of speed quite quickly. It's certainly more than capable to keep up with any modern traffic situation, but really it's happiest just cruising along. I wouldn't buy an SL of this era for an outright hardcore sports car experience. It simply wasn't built for that. But it's still nimble. The steering is really, really light. It doesn't pitch and wallow around like I thought it might do. And again, a testament to its build quality is you can go over bumps and you don't get that scuttle, shake, rattle that's so prominent in other convertible cars of the era. It's a testament to just how well this car was built, that I can go over some of the roughest roads as we are now, and there's no shake, banging, clunking at all. It just feels solid and planted. Exactly what you would expect of an SL Mercedes, really. You can do anything with this car. You can pull up anywhere and it will still turn heads, and it just looks classy. And some modern cars just arguably can't match the level of elegance, the design that comes with this era of Mercedes. bar perhaps its predecessor, the Pagoda SL, which was a really pretty little car. But the R107 carried on that legacy really well. And when you're behind the wheel and it's this really big, or what I call a dinner plate steering wheel that's iconic of Mercedes of the time, this is a late 80s example, so it's getting towards the very end of the production run of the R107 before it was replaced by the R129. And I do have one of them coming up on the channel as soon as it's fixed. It's currently in the garage, but I'm very keen to feature that car because it's one of the very first models that took over from this, and it's interesting to see how the car developed yet again, just as the R107 did from that original Pagoda. But for me, these 70s and 80s SLs, they really offer unrivaled elegance, unrivaled build quality, and I'm really keen to promote that classic car ownership does not need to be a headache, and an SL is a great example of that. They're really well supported. There's a number of enthusiast groups out there that will help you maintain one of these. And you also have the fantastic SL shop here in the UK that will quite literally either rebuild one of these cars with every nut and bolt, or if you've already got a good car to start with and you want something a little bit more sporting, don't forget that they can offer manual gearbox options, sportier suspension, so you can turn what is essentially quite a soft cruiser into a pretty impressive sports car. But this particular car is completely standard. It's covered literally as I'm speaking to you. It's just clocked over 55,000 miles from new, and it's been looked after from day one. It's a really fine example, and it shows in the driving experience. There's no play in the steering. It doesn't pitch and wallow like a worn out old car. It feels tight. It actually almost feels a little bit nimble, which is something I didn't expect from what is seemingly a very heavy car. But when I was looking at the figures for this, it weighs just 1,600 kilos, which actually is pretty light considering what this car is. But really, it's all about effortless cruising. Whether you're on a great summer's day like this, or you're on the French Riviera, or perhaps you're in California cruising around just showing off, there's no better car. And I'll be featuring another 80s icon, which is the Jaguar XJS, on the channel. And it will be really interesting to put those two cars side by side, because on paper they're very similar, but the Mercedes-Benz does feel like a much better quality product. And I love Jaguars, but this SL is a league above. The interior as well, I've obviously talked about how good the quality is, but it's so well laid out. It's almost, I don't need to open my eyes, and of course I will keep my eyes open because I'm driving, but I'm pretty sure I could be blindfolded here and still know exactly where all the instruments and buttons are, because it's been so well thought out that it's just second nature, that the radio controls are exactly where you want them to be. The heater controls, easy to read. There's not a mass of buttons in here. It's again just a really elegant, stylish, well-built dashboard that it's still impressive after all these years. And it's even more impressive when you think that this car was designed in the late 1960s. And it was light years ahead of its time in terms of what this car offered. It was so far ahead, and it was an incredibly expensive car as well. But anyone who was anybody from the era had an SL. If you were a celebrity or you wanted to be seen, you drove an SL. So it's a privilege to drive one today, really, and talk about it. But if you are thinking about buying one of these cars, the one thing to consider is they, like many classic cars, they went through a period of not being that popular. And they can cost a fair bit to keep in tip-top maintenance. You know, this build quality, they need to be looked after properly. And often when a car isn't worth a lot of money, they fall into the wrong kind of hands. So you want to pick out the best one you possibly can. That goes without saying. But also, rust is a killer. They do rust quite badly, and that's really what you want to be looking for on one of these cars now. But buy a well-sorted one, look after it, keep it off the road in the winter when they start to salt the roads, and you shouldn't have any issues. And mechanically, no matter what engine you go for, they're very, very strong. Whether it's a 6-cylinder like this, and genuinely this car feels like it could go for another 100,000 miles with just regular servicing. It really does feel that tight and just so refined to drive. And the big V8s are just the same. As long as they're properly maintained, regular oil changes, you shouldn't have any concern. But to give you an idea, I'm doing 70 miles an hour now. The windows are up, the roof is down, and it's whisper quiet in here. It's brilliant. But what should you expect to pay? Well, like most classic cars, people have now seen just how good these cars are, and they're becoming really quite sought after. But luckily, there's still a great number of these cars available, so you can look at a number of them. It's not a case of just buying whatever you can find because they're rare. They sold thousands of these, and luckily, quite a large number have survived. So you can be picky. But values have risen. You can get into a good daily driver example from somewhere around £15,000. This particular car, because it is such low mileage, low ownership, and really in immaculate condition, is around £35,000. And if you wanted to go for something that's really, really low mileage, really special, and perhaps a 500 SL, you could pay upwards of £50,000 for the very best concourse examples now. But when you compare it to other cars of the era, the SL was a league above then, and it still is. It still feels modern to drive, but it's got that really nice classic feel about it. It's a great blend of car, and even though it was designed back in the late 60s, launched in the early 70s, this being a late 80s example, it's that example as well of a really long production run, something we just don't see with cars these days. You know, when you're talking about a near 20-year production run, the cars just got better. Arguably, the earliest examples are the prettiest. They really are quite a simple, elegant design. Those early 70s examples are possibly the one to go for if you care about the aesthetics. The late 80s ones, they did get a little more complicated with the design, but it's still elegant and it's still functional, and I think it still looks great today. The USA cars, unfortunately with the regulation, they did get those impact bumpers, and for me, I prefer the look of the European cars. The American spec ones look a little more clumsy, a little more awkward, but if you did source one from the States, or you bought one in the States, you can still source European bumpers to make it look a little bit more refined and elegant. And I have to say, if I was choosing between a much, much newer SL and this car, I'd have to give this car some serious consideration, because you could use it daily without a shadow of a doubt, but it's also special enough that you could take it out of the garage at the weekend and still really enjoy it, turn up to a good country pub with it, and it's still going to turn heads. It's still a conversation piece. And not forgetting, a lot of the cars were supplied with a factory hardtop. It's a big old thing to store, so you have to bear that in mind, and it does take two people to lift it on and off the car. But once that's on, it effectively turns the car into a proper coupe. So you could use this car in the winter with no fuss whatsoever. it's a really, really practical car. You've got an excellent boot space. You've got some rear seats here, which are, well, pretty good actually. They're really only suitable for children, but you could use this as a practical classic car. For me, the SL is a great package, and let me know in the comments below what you think.